Okay, well, we are 5 minutes past 10, and I think it's a good time to get going here. Hello and welcome to all of you joining us for our first speaker series event of 2025. My name is Carlo Fanelli. I'm an associate professor of work and labor studies and the interim director of the Global Labor Research Center here at York University. I am thrilled to welcome our speakers today, who I should note have the benefit of not being in Toronto, where it is a balmy 20 degrees below zero, as we deal with a polar vortex. So I hope all of you in Italy are not struggling with the 20 degrees that you're probably having over there today. For those of you joining us for the first time, the GLRC brings together academics, labor, and community researchers interested in a labor-centered approach to policy development and social change. So in addition to our video and podcast series, our in-person seminars, our graduate student conference, even our new summer school that we're launching this year, I would encourage everyone to visit our website, where you can find pamphlets on things like employment standards, health and safety, human rights, in addition to recently developed things like opinion pieces and research summaries for a general audience. I would also encourage many of you who I know are joining us for the first time to consider getting involved with the center as a research student or even community associate, or even consider submitting an article. Really, the easiest way to do this is to sign up for our monthly newsletter on our website, where you can stay on top of all things GLRC related. I also promise that we will not spam your inboxes. Emails usually go out about once a month. We try to keep it to a minimum. So as always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or the GLRC coordinator, Carmen Ponce, who we can't thank enough for all her help today and ongoing in organizing today's event. So our panel today is titled Work Platforms and Industrial Change in Italy. Before we get started, I would like to note that today's presentations are being recorded, but that once we get to the discussion period, the recording will be disabled. So we'll be posting these presentations on the GLRC website and on YouTube, which we hope you will all share with friends and colleagues who are not able to be here today. That being said, I'm thrilled to introduce our speakers. Lidia Greco is a professor of economics and labor sociology at the University of Bari. Her research activity is mainly concerned with territorial and industrial change in an international perspective. Claudio Cozza is an associate professor in economic policy at the University of Naples Parthenope. His research interests include the internationalization of production and innovation and the theory of monopoly capitalism. Paolo Angelone is a PhD student in economics at the University of Naples Parthenope as well. His studies are focused on wage dynamics in Italy, on the relationship between wages and productivity, and on the working poor. Marco Marrone is an assistant professor at the University of Salento. His research is primarily focused on industrial sociology and the sociology of labor. He's conducted a great deal of research on platform capitalism, the gig economy, digital labor, and informal unionism. I should also mention that Marco is a former visiting postdoc here at the GLRC, so we're thrilled to welcome him back. And last but not least is Valeria Cirillo, who is an associate professor of economics at the University of Bari, Aldo Moro. She works primarily on issues related to labor dynamics, technologies, occupations, and inequalities. I am thrilled to have such dynamic, brilliant friends and colleagues joining us today. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Lidia to get us started.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just sharing the screen. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thanks to be at this seminar. My presentation intends to focus on the nexus between ecological transition and industry by seeking to overcome the mainstream visions about win-win and greening business as usual. Maybe today it's not a good day to talk about ecological transition given Trump's withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, but let us think ourselves as visionaries. We missed one member of the, of this worldwide panel, but we'll try to make a sense of it. Okay, so let's carry on in saying that the nexus between ecological transition and industry is in the public debate, is on the policy agenda. We're dealing with the planned retreat from a carbon-based economy, and this is essential to address the root causes of climate breakdown. But I'd like to stress the fact that the sustainability issue concerns and should involve a variety of other elements, dimensions of social life. I'm talking and thinking about consumption, lifestyles, urban life, mobility. So the industry is one aspect of this transition, really. So what are the objectives of my presentation? Well, I propose a sociological analysis of ecological transition and industry, and I'll try, so I question the nature of this nexus, advancing a critical, or seeking to advance a critical discourse on it. And I'll try to provide some evidence about this nexus coming from the Italian perspective. And as I said already, the ecological transition is more than electrification and decarbonization of the industrial sector. Before delving into this topic, I'd like just to give briefly an idea of what the challenge is and the context. Well, the challenge is to be able to manage the so-called trilemma, be able to protect the environment, but this shouldn't be to the detriment of economic growth. And yes, we need also to be sure that the social cohesion and justice is also preserved by the transition. Is it this an old story? Well, it's interesting to observe that these issues are fundamentally the same that we found in some reports of the 70s, and I'm referring to the Meadows report, the Brundtland report. In terms of the context, well, the action of social climate movements has been extremely important to put the theme on the agenda, but a crucial driver of that was the economic and financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. There are geopolitical reasons for the shift that has been undergoing. Then the theme reached the international organization's agenda. I'm sure you recall the 2030 UN Agenda on Sustainability. In 2019, the European Union launched the Green Deal with the aim to become a net zero continent by 2050. And so for that reason, the European Union has implemented a number of reforms and measures to implement the goal that it fixed. Now, what's the sociological? What are the points of this sociological reading about industrial change? Well, I think that first of all, we need to think about ecological transition and industry as a technical or technological cum social transformation. It is true that there's no doubt that economic systems are or will undergo a technical change because the energy models will change or are supposed to change. But we know that the technical division of labor is strictly connected to the social division of labor. So these are mutual elements in the system. So we need to think and to bear in mind that a lot will change in the field of labor and in society, because new jobs will come up, different professional profiles, different skills will be required. Second point, these are not natural processes. These are politically and economically driven processes. So this means that there are alternative perceptions, visions, different actors are on the scene with different political or power. So there are different power resources, and so this is a contentious. Those are contentious processes that, up to a point in which a new socio-technical paradigm will reach an equilibrium. These are also, and this is very important, institutionally mediated processes, in the sense that geopolitical and institutional factors affect the way in which the transition occurs. So I just mentioned one example. You find very often that there is a talk about ecological transition, but at the same time, we also say that the transition should be just. So this is a political element that was put on the top of the ecological transition. Or, for instance, the choice to balance public and private investments. Finally, we should think about these processes, or the ecological processes in the field of industry, as selective and asymmetric processes. So these produce inequalities. I've listed there a number of elements that are connected to these processes. There will be uneven impacts in terms of sectors, geography, labor. Also, the starting point of these processes is not the same. So they occur in an uneven scenario. Then they might give they can start new forms of extractivism, and this is something that in the public discourse, or in the scientific discourse better, is present. And so there are ambiguities, there are contradictions, and we need to. There are political implications also in this, in the change. And from the left behind places analysis and their political revenge to also to more critical aspects, such as the return of the state in the economy, but also there is a lot of some other implications concern this de-risking agenda for private investor. I will come back on this point in a few moments. Here I've just put some graphs, just a couple of graphs to show the the unequal or the differentiation in the impact of the green, the ecological transition. Here, I can't see the title. Oh, sorry. These are the CO2 emission, the intensity by sector, and you can see that different sectors are affected differently will be affected differently from the ecological transition. I'm not and here I put a graph on the employment in the different member states, in the European member states, the level of employment in brown activities. Again, you know, more service-oriented economies will have a limited impact by the ecological or decarbonization of the industry. I tried to give some evidence about some of the issues I've been talking about, and by talking about hydrogen and the Next Generation EU, but in reality I'm talking about the Italian National Recovery and Resilience Plan. Why hydrogen? Because this energy source has become strategic, or is strategic for the industrial decarbonization. Is seen as a key driver, actually, of decarbonization. And so it's interesting to know how, and I've been talking about the institutional level, the political level, and here I just synthesized really the European, but it's precisely the same at the Italian level, the strategy to the national and European strategy for hydrogen. And it's a very articulated strategy with touching upon production, consumption, transport of these energy source, tools, financial resources. But my point here is that the political level, the working to create a market for hydrogen, which didn't exist or didn't exist before. This is very interesting to me. Here are some graphs showing again different positions of different European countries in the production of hydrogen. So there are different starting points, there are different capacity in addressing this challenge. Here you can see the key role played by Germany in this process. Sorry for the Italian there. I wasn't able to change the graph because I took it from a document. And here, this is the Italian national plan for the Recovery and Resilience Plan, which was launched after the COVID-19 crisis. And again, I've been looking at the story of hydrogen, and it is interesting here to notice, and I explained that to you, that these are the number of projects by subjects that required the public funds. And it's interesting that, okay, there are regions, universities, but it was a surprise to me, but maybe not really, that there are also gas and oil companies that are accessing public funds to repurpose their pipelines. So and they're becoming key actors in these processes. Here it's we split the project by Italian region, and as you can see, Lombardia, which is let's say the most buoyant economy, regional economy in Italy, is of course at it's also the region which is presenting more project, and just to show that the know-how is in certain places, while some other regions are, let's say, lagging behind. And these are the last slides. I'm almost finished, just to show that with concern to the issue of raw material and new energy sources, as also here you can see that again different Italian regions are able to play the game in a different way. And with concern to energy production from solar and wind energy, I suppose that, you know, there is you can argue that there is also this issue of extractivism. The top regions in the left, on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side graph, are the most lag behind regions in Italy, but they are in the south of the country. So there's wind and there is also sun, a lot of sun. Okay, here last graphs again, but this is really the last graphs. I just here calculated the workers in hard to abate sectors, which are steel, cement, glass, chemical. And then I also counted hard to abate sectors and automotive, construction, transport, so other key industrial sectors. And again, to show that it's not a level playing field. Some areas, and there are on the left you see Taranto. You know, there are places that are connected. Their economy is connected to heavy industry, and so there are places where there is a concentration of brown activities, brown sectors, and these places the transformation will be very difficult. So just to conclude, we're in a situation we're in a phase of the ecological transformation should produce a reconfiguration of production, a restructuring of the world of work, and so all of that will ultimately produce a new international division of labor, in a context, however, of a generalized slow growth, and this is a problem. This is, to me, a key point. All of that is underlined by the view that growth is there, that capitalism is there and should be kept alive, and so the transformation should occur without changing social relations. And again, and I finished, changing the production sphere, but discourses about the transformation of welfare are not there. You can find them in the scientific circles, but not really on the agenda of policymakers. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Lidia. That was excellent. So for those who may have missed it at the outset of the discussion, we're going to be saving questions until the end. So if you have any questions, which I'm sure you do for Lidia, please hang on to those. In the interim, we'll turn it over to Claudio and Paolo.
Here we are. I thank Carlo and everybody at the Global Research Center, Labor Research Center. Let me show my slides, our slides. I hope you can see. So with Paolo Angelone, we decided to present an overview of the Italian industrial structure with a focus on productivity and wages over the last decades. So I don't know how many of you are aware of the current situation of Italian industry. Italy is still the second in manufacturing country in Europe, so a large industrial country, but with some problems. And in particular, we were trying to synthesize the main crisis characteristics of the Italian capitalism over the last decades. So what does this crisis mean? First point is deindustrialization, like in many other advanced countries. So this is after, well, between the two crises, the last two crises, so between the 2008-2009 crisis and the pandemic one, where we can see how the industrial production index is going down. So it shows the industrialization, but the same can be shown with the reduction of the manufacturing employment. So while until, let's say, mid-70s, we had a large part of the employment dedicated to manufacturing sectors, then that has decreased seriously over the last decades. A second key point is about the fact that Italy is lacking behind in technology and innovation. This is quite recent, the last innovation index to 2024, where Italy still is a moderate innovator, according to the European Innovation Scoreboard or the European Commission, basically very far from the ranking of other top European countries. But also, if we look at the index evolution, Italy is still very far from the EU average. So again, being a large industrial country, it has no, linkage to a technological and innovation-related growth and specialization. Another key issue is about the composition of the Italian industrial structure, of, let's say, of the overall firm size distribution. So as you can see, since the 90s, in over 30 years, 3 decades, micro firms still account for 95% of Italian firms, and almost all the other ones are small firms, although they, have not a so large account of employment by definition. Large firms, on the other side, still are 0.1% of total firms and account for almost 1/4 of total employment. Another issue is more recent, again, between the two crises, the financial and the pandemic crisis. We can see a process of centralization of capital after the crisis in 2008-2009, where both turnover per enterprise and employment and production value is decreasing between 2008 2010. Then we have a sharp increase of the turnover and value of production per enterprise, meaning that the largest and most productive firms are again increasing their dimension, while the other ones lag behind. This doesn't happen for the value of employment per enterprises unless the very last year before crisis, and then we have again a large and strong decrease after pandemic. Finally, the other key issue about the fact of Italy being lacking behind is linked to both inward and outward investment. So both foreign multinationals active in Italy and Italian multinationals abroad that are very limited in numbers. Concerning inward FDIs, so foreign multinationals operating in Italy, we are talking about less than 1% of total. We are considering here only manufacturing firms, so not services ones. So less than 1%. It was like that in 2008, same in 2019 before the pandemic crisis. However, with a constant increase of employees of these foreign foreign enterprises over the total industrial population. So to have a first, let's say, temporary conclusion, I wanted to show that after a period of accumulation and growth that Italy had after the Second World War until more or less the 80s, the limits of the Italian capitalism, as I was showing, made it impossible to have a real technological catching up and induced a low wages and low tech specialization of the country. So I interpret this as the capital crisis reflected on labor. On the other side, over the same period, the growth of the Italian capitalism that was pushed by strong workers' movements after Second World War until the 70s, then it stopped and has allowed the development of a cheap capitalism based on tax evasion, illegal employment, and so on, with a country pretending to survive without having a real new investment. So in this sense, to me, it is a labor crisis reflected on capital. We can see clearly this because more or less at the same time, both productivity and the wage started their stagnation. But on that, I leave the floor to Paolo that can go on.
Hello, everybody. So as Professor Cozza said, troubles in capital field are followed by troubles in labor dynamics and vice versa. And for the Italian capitalism and production structure, the need for low labor cost is chronicle and due overall because of the location of the country in the international trade, as the country is characterized by the export of medium and low value-added manufactured goods. Even today, according to Amego data, the value of export is around 1/3 of Italian GDP. And more than the 60% of import and export involve European Union country. So the strategy to reduce and to keep low the labor cost have been different during the history. First of all, the unemployment rate is the well-known concept of industrial army reserve that acts like a brake for the wage increase. And a tolerance for irregular labor. According to Istat, even today, 10% of the work phase in Italy is completely irregular, without any kind of registration. The outsourcing, this phenomenon starts spreading broadly since 70s to counteract to the powerful worker mobilizations of that years and to divide the trade union fronts. And this contribute even to the what Claudio told before about the small size of Italian enterprises. The competitive evaluation done to neutralize the wage increase of the 70s, done after the collapse of Bretton Woods system. And it's not a case that in that years, in the 75, there is the worker obtained the complete indexation of the wages to inflation. And the flexibilization of labor market since 90s, the legislation starts to remove all the achievement made by the workers in the 70s and the 60s, removing the constraint to use to the temporary contracts and simplifying the procedure of dismissals outsourcing process. And last, the offshoring treat since 90s with the globalization and the eastward expansion of European Union. And this threat is stronger in the sector where Italy is characterized, so medium and low value added manufactured goods that were even the far front of the labor movement. So it's a big challenge for the Italy that I would show here in this slide too. We see that's the difference of nominal compensation, the average nominal compensation in Italy, and the mean value of Germany and France to represent the main trade partner of Italy. And Italian compensation are lower historically, but in green I want to represent the Poland one, the Poland value, to show how the eastward expansion of European Union is a challenge for this kind of production structure. That's the unemployment rate that in Italy is historically higher than the main partner, European partners. And in orange, there is the rate of the south of the country. While the industrialization was and is in the north of the country, is concentrated in the north, the south didn't play just a passive role, but was had and has a functional role, like providing low cost labors, low cost workers. Here we can see the thousands of hours lost due to a strike to show the size of workers' movement in 60s and 70s, with the peaks of the 62 and 69, and after the slowdown since the 80s. In the 80s, since the 80s, start a restructuring process due to the to inflation problems, to the crisis of communist ideology, the triumph of neoliberalism, and the new constraint linked to the European Union. So start this process of restructuring of the industrial relations with the progressive reduction of indexation of wages and the elimination in 92. And in 92-93, the agreements between workers and employers organization made a new system of bargaining on two levels. One central level to link the wages to the planned inflation of the future, so not automatically, to ensure the purchasing power of the workers, and second level on the enterprise level to link the wages to the productivity. But this second level never really took off because especially because of the small size of enterprise in Italy. So it contributes to the decoupling of between wages and productivity growth in Italy. It's not a case that in 92-93 it starts the wage stagnation we see even today. In 90s there is of course globalization, as I told before, and the neoliberalism translated into the flexibilization of labor market. Here we see on the left side the employment protection legislation from OECD. Is an index that shows the protection of workers. Smaller is the index, smaller is the protection. In blue, there are the constraints to the use of temporary contracts, decreasing during the time. In red, the procedure of dismissal, the cost and the difficulties to make dismissals. On the right side, we see the percentage of atypical workers that is continuously increasing. Here there is the adjusted wage share. It's an indicator that best represents the conflict, the distributional conflict, because it's the percentage of all the value added produced in 1 year that goes to the labors as a gross wage and as social contribution. And from another perspective, it represents the real unit labor cost, the percentage of the cost that goes to the labor factor. We see that from the 80s, in the restructuring period, from the 80s till the beginning of the new millennium, there is a collapse after a grow up due to not to increase of the wages, but to a decrease of the productivity. And finally, we see another drop linked to the current inflation crisis. Finally, as some scholars argued, low labor costs discourage the organizational improvements and investment in production, because entrepreneurial class can use cheap workers, so don't need to invest. And we see that in the 70s, the 40-45% of the profits were reinvested in the production, while now is around 1/3 of the profits invested in production. So in conclusion, the Italian crisis appear handless. Just in 2024, we returned to the GDP of before the subprime crisis, the real GDP of the 2007, and the production structure is becoming every time more marginal and low, with a low value added. So thank you for your attention.
Yes, thanks also on my side. I hope this historical overview can help. Thank you.
Great. Many thanks to Paolo and Claudio for an excellent presentation. Next, we'll turn it over to Marco.
Okay, I'll share the screen. Okay, I give for granted that you can look at it. So if not, just please say something. And well, first of all, okay, good. Well, first of all, let me express my gratitude for Carlo and Carmen to organize this event and this discussion. I mean, as Carlo said, I've also been a visiting scholar for the GLRC, so I'm very happy to be here 10 years after. I mean, and also would like to give special thanks to Mark Thomas, that was a GRC director at the time, so I'm very happy he's also connected today. And so basically, I'm going to talk about what I've done in the last 10 years when I came back from Toronto. And so this almost 10 years long research I'm conducting among food delivery workers that actually started in 2017, where in a very quite unusual way, because I've been one of the founding members of Riders Union Bologna, that is one of the many informal unions that mushroom the food delivery sector, not only in Italy, of course, but at the global level. And so basically, I've conducted the research as a sort of observatory participation, inspiring to the Italian tradition of con research, like the work that Romano Alquati done back in the 70s, where the point is to look at conflicts not simply as an object of study itself, but also as a methodology. So to start from the premise that during the hot phases when conflict is going on, they reveal what normally remains invisible. So in this sense, conflicts are also a producer of knowledge, and this is where a focus on somehow following also methodologically the struggle and what the struggle was really revealing during while it was going on. Of course, I also had the opportunity to enrich this database with my involvement in Horizon 2020 Project Plus. And today I'm going to talk about three research questions. So where digital platforms come from, what are the consequences they have had on workers, and also how their power can be challenged by workers. You can see I have a large database. I don't go further on this. Then, of course, if there are questions, I'm happy to elaborate a little more about that. So firstly, when I start taking interest into this topic 10 years ago, the mainstream narrative was still very much that of the optimist techno-deterministic hypothesis. So the idea that the rise of digital platforms that at the time was connected with this imaginary of the sharing economy. You can see the cover of The Economist that was saying that basically you don't need to be rich to live like a rich person for one day, because you can rent a beautiful house, a beautiful car, car, even a dog can be rent for $5 for a walk. So basically, here the view is that digital technologies have made sharing cheaper, so it makes the meeting of demand and offer easier than before, and this somehow explains not only the rise of digital platforms, but this sort of techno-socialist view where digital technology will save us from the typical disease of capitalism, and also private property, control of labor, and whatsoever. Of course, one of the first things that became clear while I was basically with work was that things were much more complex than that, but also that maybe platforms are not so new as some of our platforms used to say. Back in time, during my PhD, I've read a book of Boltanski and Capello called The New Spirit of Capitalism, where back in 1999, where they were describing the 90s restructuring of global production, they say that the spirit of capitalism was a connectionist spirit. So somehow already 25 years ago, this idea of connection as a new paradigm for capitalism was already in there. But also, another thing I've noticed that somehow it's not Deliveroo that invented the pizza delivery, it's not Airbnb that invented short-term rentals, or I don't know, Helping that invented the domestic work. Somehow the most popular digital platforms provide the services historically related to the informal economy. And this is very important considering the Italian context, because as you can see from the map I've taken from with ILO data, Italy is in Europe is one of the countries that has the largest size of informal economy, that reach 5%. Other teams say that it reaches even 20%. Of course, it's a data that is very difficult to grab, but definitely one of the things is that also the south of Italy is much more, informal economy in the south of Italy is much more relevant than it is in any other region in Europe. So this gives also a very makes Italy a very interesting case study to look at this relationship between digital platforms and informal economy. Also, it might not be a coincidence that if many of the most popular platforms emerged after 2008 financial crisis and after the decades of austerity policies that somehow created the situation that Claudio and Paolo just described before me. This means that taking the Marxist somehow approach to accumulation, capitalism do not only aim to increase production, but also to expand the number of commodities. And this is especially happens in times of crisis. This is why also many post-colonial studies have highlighted how informal economy becomes relevant in times of crisis for capitalism. And this is definitely the case of digital platforms. I mean, using data, as you can see from this slide, these are the 25 top investors in the food delivery sector, and there is no Mr. Just Eat or Mr. Deliver or Mr. Glovo behind platforms, but there is a bunch of financial funds, including JP Morgan, including Deutsche Bank, well, including many of those that were responsible for the austerity policies that somehow also managed a way to get benefit of the social situation they created with their policies. This is also relevant to understand what are the consequences for labor, but I also needed to introduce another concept before getting into my findings. What I mean here with digital labor? Well, I basically refer in this case to the work of Antonio Casilli that is actually just recently translated in English. So you can find his book, Waiting for Robots, and basically the digital labor theory is saying that the impact of digitalization on labor is not that of making human labor disappear, but actually of radically transforming, somehow to hide human labors in ways that it escapes its fundamental characteristics and ultimately also escape to standard employment protection. Okay, so this is the very basic starting point of my reflection. Also, this means that we should look at data extraction somehow as a second source of value that goes beside the traditional forms of exploitation, but it's basically the most relevant innovation that the digital platforms have introduced. It's not a very new thing. Already Roman Alquati, in the study I was referencing, make notice how workers are not simply producers of commodities or services, but also producers of knowledge. And this knowledge is very interesting for capitalism as well. Well, in the case of digital platforms, somehow this production of knowledge that once was positioned at the margin of the production of value in capitalism is basically entering into its very core. And this is crucial to understand three paradoxes of digital labor that I found and I'm going to talk about. The first one of the questions I often received while I was presenting my work was like, well, I mean, I see your critical points, but at the end of the day, are platforms formalizing the informal sector? Isn't that good? Well, I mean, it is true that these sectors are not anymore in the formal sphere, but because of the safe employment and the status of food delivery workers and the other platform workers, workers are basically maintained in the same condition of poverty and insecurity that characterize informal employments. As Federico, one of the workers I've interviewed, used to say, the problem is not so much about wages. You can even tighten your belt for a couple of months. I don't know if you say something like this in English, but in Italy, it means you can do some sacrifices for a while. But the real problem is when you break your arms or break your legs, and then what are you going to do next, okay? In fact, it's not a coincidence that the first struggle of food delivery workers were not related to wages, but to insurance, to get access to health protection. Secondly, it's also true that it's not even true that platforms are somehow limiting informal practices, because at the end of the day, what I found with my interviews is that informal practices are actually perpetrated by platform workers and somehow tolerated by platforms. This is, for example, the use of bot. Bot is an app that you can install on your smartphone and basically book the working shift for you and somehow tricks the algorithm. Well, if this is true, on the other hand, as Abdel used to say, this also creates inequalities. So somehow the point is that platforms tolerate these practices because at the end of the day, it increases the productivity of workers. So it's a way to walk around from algorithmic management, but on the other hand, also to perpetrate somehow its purpose of increasing profits. Also, the other aspect is the rise of digital gang masters. So the fact that some workers rent their own account to others in exchange of money, and other people that operate without having their own accounts. Well, in this case, it's also very much tolerated. The last section is not from an interview, but actually it's from the police investigation, because Uber Italy, for this practice and for basically somehow planning this sort of practices, has also been sanctioned of more than 400,000 euros. That's basically one of the highest sanctions ever given to an employer. So this to say that somehow also they keep producing, not only they don't solve, but also keep producing informality. The second paradox is also flexibility. The other question I often received is, well, but are platforms increasing the flexibility of workers? At the end of the day, you can book your shift, you can work wherever you want, you can even refuse a delivery if you receive it. Well, this is true in theory, but in practices, basically, the extraction of data allow the expansion of traditional industrial principles of controls of labor on contexts where this was not existent. Because investigating food delivery workers, it clearly emerged, first of all, how they are exposed under a constant surveillance. So their feeling is that if you slow down for whatever reason, you basically receive a call or a message from the platforms. Also, data extraction is crucial to feed the ranking system. Every worker has a number that somehow identifies his productivity, his loyalty with the platforms, and this number gives them access to deliveries, to book shift, and somehow gives them rewarding in some sense. On the other hand, those have a low ranking are punished because they can't book the book shift, they don't receive deliveries. So as Lara used to say, yes, it's true, you are free to do whatever you want, but then you also have to pay your consequences for the behaviors you have done. So basically, you see the data here are used to feed this punishing and rewarding system that reward those that comply with platform needs and somehow put at the margins, if not ultimately expel from the platform, those that do not comply with them. Also, also the ranking and more how in general how platforms works also basically may introduce a sort of soft power or a making out to use Boroway famous concept, because interviewing workers, they often tell me that even if you don't want, even if you know basically the tricks of this game, when you are reaching a restaurant to wait for your order, you try to arrive first, because first come, first served. So there is this competitive behavior that's somehow produced. And this is also related on the fact that all the time the workers wait for their order because of their self-employment is totally unpaid. So being competitive is very much necessary to optimize your possibility to get a decent wage at the end of the week. Finally, probably the most common question I have received is, how many food delivery workers are there? Well, the response is that we don't know, and we can't know, because basically the fact that there is an unknown number of active workers is crucial for the functioning of food delivery platforms. In some sense, we can say that digitalization allowed to incorporate the industrial reserve army, Marx's notion of the industrial reserve army, within the socio-technical arrangements of algorithmic management. The most evident case of this I found during my research is the case of Deliverus Frank. Now, Frank is not a human. Frank is a human name given to an algorithm of Deliveroo that is basically able to calculate the workforce they need in a certain time. So, for example, let's say in Toronto, on Saturday night, we need 500 workers. And if the number is below 10, it's 450, they start to send messages like the one you see in the slides, the one we received during one of the strikes we organized, that basically gives a reward like a little extra of €2 or €3 in this case for those joining the platform in that moment. Okay, so basically Frank is able to know how many food delivery workers they need, and they solicitate with their message for those to join the platforms. So in this case, I use the concept of potential labor that I take from a very grounded literature and ultimately from Sandro Mezzada's work, that basically put emphasis on this idea that the industrial reserve army is not anymore at the border of production, but it's really in its core. It's somehow incorporated in the platform. And you can see it in very different ways. First of all digital platforms are based on very low entry barriers. Working for digital platform, it's very easy. Like Luca, one of the workers I've interviewed, say, it's like when you sign up on Facebook. It's not anymore that you need an interview. You might not even meet any human before you start to work, no? So basically, everyone can work, and there is basically a potential range of many workers that can be incorporated. Also, this somehow surplus of necessary workforce is very crucial to obtain obedience and to install competitive behavior. Again, yes, you can refuse, but since you don't know how many workers are there, you really don't know when you're going to receive the next assignment. This is what Salvo said. So basically, this lack of knowledge of how many workers is also crucial somehow to make workers compliant with platform and algorithmic demands. And finally, of course, it's very crucial in case of workforce discipline. It's not a coincidence that this message was sent during one of the strikes that workers had, but also more in general, one of the response Writers Union Bologna received after its first strike was basically that the workforce increased for another 100, and somehow means they doubled the total workforce available. And this, of course, was also a way somehow for platforms to show their power against unions. No, so you organize. So first you're gonna receive a ranking, a low ranking. Then we put you at the margin, and then we can put 100 workers more. And this, of course, for the unions also means that you have to start unionization again, because the workforce totally doubles. So it's really essential somehow, in my opinion, these forms of the way in which platform organize not only effective workers, but I say potential workers somehow. Finally, how this can be challenged? Well, this question somehow totally changed while I was doing my fieldwork, because at the very beginning, you must say that it's really a context, that of food delivery platforms, where union can't work, because you have a lack of formal rights, because they are self-employed, they can't even join a proper union, a traditional union. There is a high turnover of the workforce, I've mentioned. There is a huge level of digital despotism and super exploitation. And moreover, digital platforms have always showed this anti-union attitude. So all the times that workers tried to get a bargaining with them, they always refused and always say, they are not even a proper employer. They are just an infrastructure, a digital infrastructure that allow workers and restaurants to meet each other. So they don't even have a proper industrial relation manager somehow. But despite this, not only in Italy, of course, but transnationally, workers have managed to organize, and somehow food delivery workers have even become a symbol of precarity. So we have witnessed a mushrooming of informal unions, of national and international networks. We have witnessed also successful outcomes, like local regulation, like in Bologna. There was an agreement with local platforms, but there was also national regulation in Italy and also in Spain. There was a very effective, especially in Spain, a law to regulate these sectors. And also there were platform agreements, not so many for the moment, but takeaway.com, but that is basically the biggest multinational platforms operating in the European context, also signed an agreement with workers, and finally recognizing the demand to become a properly employee of the platforms. So how the question changed? Basically, the question is not even anymore how they managed to organize and to overcome the obstacles the digital platform posed to unionization, but why they have been successful, how they managed to be successful. Well, I've tried to respond to this question together with a colleague, Nicola Quando Matteo, who's working in the University of Padua and actually was also part of the Writers Union. And we have tried to interpret the relative success of food delivery workers through the lens of the struggle for recognition. Now, the keyword here is that of recognition, that also has very solid philosophical and sociological basement. We know the debate between Honneth and Fraser about struggle for redistribution and struggle for recognition, but also probably more crucially in this case, the work of Alessandro Pizzorno about Fiat struggle in the 1969. I mean, as Claudio and Paolo were showing, basically that was one of the peak of workers' conflictuality in Italy, and he explained so this peak of conflictuality, saying that it's not simply a matter of struggle for redistribution. Fiat workers were not simply demanding higher wages, but it was a struggle for recognition. So it was more of a generical demand of getting access to a decent life, let's put it in this way. And this is also a typical way of somehow way of organizing of informal works in this case. So we found again informality also when we talk about struggle. Well, we have tried to I don't know what's happening in the slide. It's not me doing this thing. So well, we have tried somehow to unpack this notion of the struggle for recognition, to discuss a first dimension of internal recognition. So the way in which workers through built up solidarity, like repairing big shop, or they share knowledge about labor rights, or they even used WhatsApp groups to build a kind of self-help. At the very beginning, Riders Union Bologna was not a union with a clear demand of recognition, was born more as a self-help group. But somehow this was crucial also to the formation of a common identity. Okay, a second dimension, so somehow it was essential to build a mutual recognition among workers. The second level of recognition is what we name the institutional recognition, because the practices they employ, the strikes, rally, the use of social media, the appearance of TV shows, somehow also pushed local, national, and finally, even the European Union that has recently approved a directive on platform labor. And this is also a very important achievement, not simply for food delivery workers, but I mean, the European Union very barely have regulated, have made pro-labor legislation, so it's quite an exception. And this was also achieved through the use of discursive power that somehow made food delivery workers and platform workers more in general an image of a more broad transformation, a more process of precarization that was happening. To quote one of the most popular slogans that the Italian food delivery workers used, it's not for us, but for everyone. So the confidence that what was happening in the food delivery sector was actually just the beginning of a broader transformation that was moving beyond that, and somehow institutions had to take care about that. And finally, a more traditional recognition by employers that happened through collective bargaining and collective agreement, although of course these are still very much weak, and because I mean the union is still some not so powerful in this context. But of course, the concept of recognition has also been used, for example, as you all know, by Amazon workers in the United States. So here, the future question I'm working on, the one I want to give to this room is maybe recognition a keyword for future labor studies. And so, yeah, I think I'll stop with that. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Marco. That was an excellent presentation. Really enjoyed that. And last but not least, I am happy to turn it over to Valeria.
Thank you, Carlo. Let me share my screen. I hope you can see. Okay. So my presentation is very much linked to the previous one, but also done by Marco, but also with what Lidia and Claudio Angelo said, in the sense that the roots of digital platforms are very much connected with the precarization of Italian labor market. So I will speak about the impact of labor market, mainly focus on quantitative type of studies, trying to provide the two type of perspective, more direct impact that is the one on workers, but also another impact more indirect that we are recently exploring using even firm level type of data. So let me say, well, very quickly, because you already said a lot. So this is quite an outline of what I'm saying. And so I will provide some evidence on the link, digital platforms and labor, worker level evidence. So dimension of precarity in platform work. With respect to that, obviously, Marco has already said a lot. And maybe this is more the novelty, digital platform and techno-economic dependency of firms, implication for businesses and labor. Well, very quickly, let me say that from a macro perspective, large digital platforms such as big tech are nowadays key driver of structural change in contemporary capitalism. They concentrate a lot of techno-economic power. In this respect, there is also recent work done by Claudio Cozza with other colleagues such as Dario Guaraci and Andrea Coveri, following more Marxist type of traditions such as Vasudevan and others. If you're interested in that, there is a very interesting number on the Cambridge Journal on paper journal online. Platforms are providing reshaping the operation of knowledge, innovation network and ecosystem. They provide a surveillance-based business model, as was put forward by Zuboff some years ago, and also challenging the very conceptualization of firm. Why? Because they provide diffusion of algorithmic management, even beyond the digital labor market. If we think in more traditional contexts, such as, a fulfillment center, such as the one of Amazon, which can be a logistic traditional context, but even in that case, the new tech artifacts provide forms of algorithmic management, because this device, of course, allows control and a lot of other things. So there is an increasing capacity of control nowadays used by companies in relation to labor, obviously stiffening hierarchical relations. From a labor perspective, this means a process of labor fragmentation and increase basically inequalities, even in a global sense, because we know there is actually a labor dynamic of labor fragmentation at global scale, if we think even from a global south perspective. Well, the topic of, I don't know if there are students following this seminar, but of course you can have different views on the sort of digital platforms in a different branch of literature and even disciplines, because, for example, more microeconomic views can say, okay, but digital platform actually can have a negative impact on labor, but with ambiguities, because there is a story rooted in monopsony power. If you think in more, economic type of thinking, there is an issue of fragmentation, but also of monitoring and bargaining power. If you think in terms of principal agent theories, but sometimes you can find, or even scholars saying, digital platforms can have a positive impact on work and organizational innovation, although with ambiguities, because actually platforms allow to lower search and transaction costs. They reduce so-called asymmetric information and signaling. They allow organizational innovation. So, you can find different type of views in different type of discipline. If you think in management studies, you have a lot of stuff in this sense. There are then radical approaches, believing in non-competitive markets, and saying that actually digital labor platforms, in general platforms, expand the pool of labor to be exploited. I would say more Marxist theories, they say that there is an increasing competition among workers, there is a direct and even an indirect value extraction. If you think in the story of data extraction that also Marco was pointing out, there is in general an increasing exploitation rate. So all these actually put a negative, you see this negative in red sign saying that there is a pressure on labor. So in terms of labor condition, there is actually a general worsening of labor condition for workers when they interact with platforms. Third streams, more sociological, pointing to industrial relation and labor view. Even in this case, usually studies such as Julius Schor and so on, they point to a negative relation, because they say, okay, there is a labor market flexibility, digital precariousness, in general weakening bargaining power. That is the thing that also Marco was pointing out. There is an issue in terms of worsening of labor condition and income vulnerability. Marco was mainly focusing on a specific sector, that is the one on food type of platforms, but of course, as you know, the world of platform is very much heterogeneous because you can have different organizational model. A platform can be online, create online labor market, but also mobile labor market. Depends on where actually the task is undertaken. So you can have, for instance, Amazon Mechanical Turk, but also you can have Twago that are both online labor market, but also you can have more, mobile labor market, such as where the task is in the real world, the physical world, such as helping or such as take lessons. Of course, there are also huge heterogeneity in terms of services, because this can be micro task versus more, let's say, complicated, more skilled, let's say, labor and tasks, such as in the case of take lessons, where usually people, workers are teachers, or they have some specific skills with respect, to helping, where usually you have you don't have a specific request for task. Although obviously these definitions are quite rough, because we know there is then also an intersection of things. A big heterogeneity is also in the model of platforms, in the sense of how, for instance, tasks are allocated to workers. So platform differs in terms of task allocation, since you can have platform determined work, but also client determined work, and also worker determined work. As you can understand, obviously platform determined work are the worst for workers, because and also the client determined work are the worst for workers, because actually it's the platform that matches client and workers in the first case, or is the client selecting a worker, whereas in the last case is usually the worker, which is usually more skilled, that can pick up, in a sense, the task, some specific task. Well, as I said, the platforms provide a very extreme organizational flexibility for companies, because it allows company to dispose of work according to its own strategic objectives, beyond the regulatory and contractual constraint of each country. So some authors, such as Dosivio Giglito, but also Casilli Posada, in the case of Dosivio, they speaks about digital taylorism, and even a new international division of labor. If we think in the case, as I said, on a global scale, if you think in the industry of AI now, actually this is fueled by platforms used to train the AI algorithm, and usually people are located in the global south. Let me say that the majority of contribution in this field, even from an economics perspective, have been done at the individual level. So lots of empirical contribution have focused on workers' vulnerability and economic insecurity. Also, in our case, together with other colleagues, Dario Guarascio and Zachary Parolin, we have explored one of the few actually database available on this, because there is also a problem of knowing how much platform workers are, for several reasons. So for statistical reasons, actually we do not have a lot of high quality data, representative data that are able to track to trace, to provide an identikit which is statistical representative of the population of platform workers. But one of the few sources is this PLUS database. The last version is 2021, saying that in case of Italy, we have around 500,000 platform workers, which is actually very much underestimated, because you do not have irregular migrants there, and also a lot of other people, which means about, if you are curious, 1.3% of active population in 2021. For 14%, of people, this is the main income activity. So between, in this collective of 5,100 platform workers, almost half of them for that is the main income activity. 25% does not manage its own account, 30% does not have a minimum wage per hour, and 50% pay per each assignment. So very kind of a poor working condition. So the literature says the channels through which you have an increase in vulnerability are basically three. The low pay, we know the platforms, the pay are quite low. Volatility in working hours and wage, because actually you are not able to know how much you will work over the year, and also privatization of risk, because you are not covered by actually a contract. In lots of cases, or the contract is like an autonomous contract, so you are not seen as actually a dependent employees. In terms of tasks, if you are curious, these are the data from the INAC Plus survey. Obviously, as I said, there is an underestimation, but if you are curious, at the top of the list in 2018, you have cleaning someone's house or doing their homework activities, but then you have also driving for a ride sharing app, delivering meals to home, and so on. Whereas in 2021 there is a little bit of change in the ranking, because you have delivering meals to home as at the top of the list. I think because there is also the pandemic in between, so the ranking in terms of tasks changed a little bit. Then you have also performing online activities. That is now the second one that, according to what workers declare, is one of the most common tasks done through the platforms. Interesting to see that if we compare the two waves, 2018 and 2021, there is an increasing proportion of platform workers saying that for them, having income from the platform is really, really relevant. You see, the orange column, the 2021, it corresponds to the percentage of people saying, okay, this is an important part of my budget, although not essential. And also you have an increasing with respect to the blue part of people saying this is essential to meet my basic needs, at least compared to the blue bar, which was the before the pandemic. Very much linked to what Marco was saying, we have tried to compute how being on a platform actually help people to be employed, because sometimes the rhetoric can be, okay, better that than anything, then at least you can do something in the labor market, so let's use the platform. But in this case, we see that the proportion of people that are not able to cope with unforeseen expenses is, in case of platform workers, is 35%, which is very much comparable with unemployed. So this was for 2018. If we see the same rank figures for 2021, actually we see that this proportion grows to 76%. So it means that basically this 76% of platform workers are not able to deal with unexpected expenses, such as the health expenses, the dental care, because they do not have the possibility to anticipate expenses or to have enough cash to deal with such expenses. And this is even higher with respect to unemployed people, so people that are basically not in the labor market. Now, this is what the micro-level evidence suggests in terms of a quantitative type of analysis. But now what we are going to do, even in terms of research, so I'm very happy to share with you this new line of research. We are trying to see if there is even an indirect link between platform and work through the firms that use platforms to sell their goods. So exploring this techno-economic dependency of firms. Why? On the New York Times a couple of years ago, there was the page saying prime power, how Amazon squeezes the business behind its toe. So basically pointing to the fact that lots of small-scale shops are trapped, depends on Amazon where a marketplace to sell their products. So they depend on big platforms. Here, the literature, there are different points to understand, in the sense there is obviously a story of strong power asymmetries, because we know platforms are gatekeepers, they monopolize key services and can unilaterally enforce changes in contractual competitive conditions. If you, for instance, would like to put your products on the top of the page in the Amazon marketplace, you have to pay and also you have to react as the platform wants in terms of condition that usually the platforms put. So platforms power is rooted in different things. Here the theory can be the one put forward by Cutolo and Kenny in this paper 2021, saying that there is an issue of techno-economic features of digital platforms. If you think in the lock-in dynamics, basically lack of alternatives. If I don't sell my products through Amazon Marketplace, actually I do not have alternative. Or if you think in the hotel sector, in the tourism sector, actually, or you are on Booking, or basically you do not exist. So platforms' ability to match buyers and sellers or service providers. So sometimes they ensuring actually market access, but you can access the market only through the platforms. There is also a peculiar governance, as I said, control, pricing policies, unilateral setting of terms and conditions, and so on. So all this stuff can increase firm vulnerability because firms are actually depends on the platforms. Our point is, okay, if this is true, let's check how this company behave in terms of labor. So if there is also an impact in terms of labor on workers that work in these firms actually dependent on platforms. As I said, the theory can be built on this Cutolo and Kenny story, saying that at the beginning, when you enter the market at firm, actually you are as a startup, it can be even useful to stay on a platform because the platforms allows you to have lower cost, risk, and uncertainty. But as far as the time goes by, so as your business model in a sense consolidate, the relationship reverse, and then in that case it becomes for you for you as a company, the cost and risk and uncertainty to be on the platforms are actually higher with respect to those companies that are in a sense traditional entrepreneurship or have their own digital model, digital portal, website, and so on. So if you are curious and you want to know how many, which is the percentage and the penetration of these digital platforms in Italy, we use this peculiar survey that we built together with INAP, and also in this case, this is representative of the firms in two sectors that are hospitality and restaurants. Obviously, these are the ones where the penetration of platforms is higher. In this case, you see that firms using platform in hospitality, in the case of guest house, social stays, and B&B, as we all expect, is very high, is 76%. Hotel and similar accommodation, 74%, tourist village, 49%, and so on. In terms of restaurants, the percentage is a little bit lower. Catering, takeaway food, 14%, full service restaurant, 12%, ice cream, pastry shops, about 7%. So quite heterogeneous across the two sectors, but very strong in the sense, very established in the case of the hospitality. Curious about the name? Well, obviously, Booking, Airbnb, Expedia, others. Here we have Just Eat, Deliveroo, Glovo, and so on, The Fork, and so on. Now, as I said, one of the issues in terms of techno-economic dependency is the burden of fees, because this company pay fees to stay on the platforms. In fact, this is just a cumulative distribution, says the density distribution says how many companies are below this curve, and the bold one, the blue bold one, says that the share of turnover through platform is more than 50% in the case of hospitality, and you have the majority actually of company below this curve. So the more you are dependent in terms of revenues from the platforms, of course, the higher the higher is the burden of fee that you have on you as a company. Now, if this is the story and you believe in this story, let's try to see how this company behave in terms of non-standard work, precarious labor condition. This graph says that basically companies that rely on digital platforms have on average a higher percentage of temporary and occasional employees with respect to permanent employees. And also the blue bar is lower because they pay on average lower wages compared to those companies that do not rely on platforms. So sorry, the red one. So say you see in the hospitality, the red bar is very much lower in the sense that the wages are usually lower. We cannot say the same here, which is the transport that actually we don't use, in this one where the restaurant sector. We also tested this relation through a regression analysis, and I will be very quick only to say that even when we control for other factors, actually there is a positive relation between the use of platform by firms and the use of temporary contracts. So saying that, you see, these tasks just suggest that if the company relies more on platforms, this company is more likely to use a temporary, no standard type of work. We did the same also splitting by restaurants and hospitality, and the relationship is still there. We also interact platform by turnover to test if this relationship is even stronger when the company grows in terms of turnover, and this is verified for the hospitality, what is not there for the restaurants, suggesting that the model of Butler and Kenny, so how much stronger you became, more the platforms comes in and force you to use precarious type of job, because basically because you have to face some form of uncertainty. So I will close here just saying that, of course, there is a need of regulation. Let me say that this is not enough, also because after the presentation of Marco, of course, there is an issue of collective organization that is really relevant, because I mean, the issue of regulation sometimes is not enough, although it is important to have some rules. In this respect, there is the issue of the EU Parliament adopted the directive, adopted the Platform of Work Directive in April 2024, actually putting new rules to correct full self-employment, new rules on algorithm management, transparency and data protection. There are obviously potential unresolved issues. The first one that I see is the one concerning irregular migrants, that becomes very digital slavery, creating an issue of digital slavery. In the case of care sector, where actually you do not need means of production, you think you want to start working and you don't have anything about with the exception of yourself. So in this case, obviously working in the care sector, cleaning, or for instance cleaning houses, can be quite easy, and in fact is something that many asylum seekers start doing. So just to say that sometimes you need also to link this type, if you do an issue, if you intervene in terms of regulation, but then there is the issue of citizenship rights, these people are basically not covered by this type of intervention. So just to see that there are several potential unresolved issues that we should consider. The second point of my research that I present today was about the firm level story, saying that there is now an issue of loss of independence by small-scale producers, because platforms mediate work previously carried out independently or in small-scale businesses. So we need actually to monitor also indirect exploitation of workforce. There are indicators of poor job quality in the tourist sector. In the tourist sector, platform may drive business to increase the use of flexible contracts. So we should also pay attention to this indirect form of exploitation. And just a little bit of advertising, say that we have a specific print project. This is very much for the Italian, saying that, I mean, we are still doing research on this stuff, and the title of the project is actually Living and Working Conditions in the Digital Economy in Italy and the European Union. So I'm very happy to be here, and I thank very much Carlo and Carmen for organizing this moment to exchange ideas and reflections on this topic. Thank you very much.
Great. Many thanks to Valeria, and thanks to all of our presenters for an excellent discussion and such interesting presentations. While they all differed, I think there are a lot of parallels there. So we have about